Hi, it's Kai. Number 10. The Leopard Boy. It seems impossible, but there was a young boy who had been stolen at 2 years old from a small village in India by a leopard. It happened while his mother was out in the fields cutting rice. Villagers had apparently killed 2 of the leopard's cubs just days before, and the mother had been lurking along the outskirts of the village, waiting to get her revenge ever since. The leopard allegedly took the boy, brought him into the jungle, and instead of eating him, she raised him as her own cub for 5 long years. When the boy was finally found, it was by hunters outside of the village. They killed the mama leopard and found the young boy hiding with 2 other leopard cubs. Aww. During those years he lived with the leopards, the boy had developed a very keen sense of smell. His toes had turned upright to help him run, and the palms of his hands had become calloused with exceptionally tough skin. The boy would fight and bite any person who got too close to him, and when he spotted something like a wild fowl, he would chase it and try to tear it to pieces. The boy had been so dramatically altered that he wouldn't even sleep in a normal bed when he was returned to his human family's house. His father actually had to tie him to a post in the yard and let him sleep outside. In the end, the leopard boy apparently made a fairly normal recovery, though it took some time. Number 9. Dog Boy. In the 1990s, Ivan Mishkov was a little boy living alone in the streets of Moscow. He was what you might call a street rat, kind of like Aladdin. He was just a young boy trying to survive on his own. Ivan learned that if he took care of the wild dogs he shared the streets with, they would take care of him in return. Ivan was only 4 years old when he integrated himself into a dog pack and began prowling the streets of Moscow like his canine companions. This went on for several years, until Ivan was eventually captured by the local authorities. What happened next will really make you wonder who the real animals are. After Ivan was taken away from his dog family, he was put in an orphanage. The dogs from his pack started to come around and wait outside the orphanage for Ivan to come out. They missed him. And guess what the humans did? They killed them. They literally killed Ivan's dog family. And while this is definitely extremely tragic, Ivan actually ended up having a pretty normal life. He is still alive today, all over social media, and he has a proper job, a real human family, and is doing extraordinarily well for a boy who started life homeless and literally living with dogs. Number 8. Wild Girl of France. The Wild Girl of France wasn't raised by animals. Instead, she was raised by the wilderness itself. The story goes like this. The girl was first spotted in 1731 in the Champagne region of France, stealing apples from somebody's tree. She carried a club with her and was dressed in rags. The villagers set their dogs on the girl, but she beat them away with her club, climbed into the trees, and then vanished into the woods. It was such a strange thing to happen that the local nobleman ordered her to be captured, and she was, only she couldn't talk. She screeched and hissed at the humans, acting like some kind of wild animal. Sources at the time claimed that she looked to be anywhere between 10 and 18 years old. In 1755, a biographer chronicled the girl's story, and what she found was nothing short of remarkable. It turned out that the wild girl had actually been sold into slavery when she was only 7 years old and shipped from somewhere near Wisconsin to France. During that trip, the boat shipwrecked, and she ended up washing ashore in France, at which point she slipped into the forest. After her capture in 1731, she was baptized and treated at a hospital. She had a pretty hard time adjusting. However, she did manage to learn fluent French, and then, in a twist, she became wildly wealthy. A local duke was fascinated by her and gave her a generous sum of money, which she used to move to Paris. Throughout her life, she would meet many famous figures, such as Queen Marie, the legendary wife of Louis XV. Number 7. Bird Boy. Another wild story, straight out of Russia. There was once a boy who had been treated like a pet bird by his mother and ended up being essentially raised by the birds in the house. He was rescued by Russian care workers at the age of 7, but could only communicate by chirping and tweeting like a bird. The child was found inside of a small apartment filled mostly with bird cages and covered in bird food and bird poop. Apparently, his mother had never spoken human words to him in his whole life, and so his only way of communicating had been by mimicking the birds in the apartment. When he was spoken to by a human, all he did was chirp back. This is definitely one of the stranger cases of child abuse, because the boy's mother never beat him or did anything inherently cruel. She just never talked to him. So he basically became a bird. The boy was temporarily transferred to an asylum after being rescued, and then he was taken to a psychological care center. According to the Daily Mail, his mother willingly signed a form releasing him into the government's care. Hopefully, the boy will learn to talk properly so that he can grow up to be able to be a functional member of society. What do you think of this bird boy? Let me know in the comments below. And if you're liking this video, be sure to hit the thumbs up and subscribe buttons if you haven't already. Number 6. Monkey Boy. A native of Uganda, John Sibunya disappeared into the forest in the 1980s when he was just a boy. He did this right after allegedly witnessing his own father murder his mother when he was just about 3 years old. Rather than sticking around to deal with the consequences, John ran off into the forest and was then raised by monkeys. The child managed to survive by watching the monkeys and then mimicking their actions. He lived like this, surviving only from the knowledge he gained from the monkeys until 1991 when he was discovered by a random villager. By then, John was more monkey than man, and even when John became an adult, he still couldn't shake his monkey tendencies. Of course, there were a lot of people who disputed John's story. There will always be non-believers, but this really did happen. The villagers who first found John were scared he might be an evil spirit. And to confirm his story, a BBC documentary crew working with anthropologists put John into a wild group of monkeys to see what would happen. And they found that he could communicate with the monkeys far better than any normal person could. Plus, the monkeys immediately behaved as they would to another member of their monkey group. This really solidified the fact that John was definitely raised by these animals. And John actually went on to have a pretty fantastic life. He participated in the Special Olympics in both 1999 and 2003. Number 5. Gazelle Boy. Forget about monkeys and wolves. This next boy was literally raised by wild freaking gazelles. He was first discovered in the 1950s by an anthropologist named Jean-Claude Auger on his travels across the Sahara. There had been rumors in the region about a boy running with the gazelles, but it took roughly a week for the anthropologist to actually locate him. And when he did, he could not believe what he was seeing. The gazelle boy walked on all fours. He had insanely powerful muscles in his legs, and he behaved just like a gazelle. He even twitched all of his muscles in response to a noise like a snapping twig, just like a gazelle or a deer would. Naturally, the anthropologist decided to capture the gazelle boy, though not before chasing him in his Jeep to see just how fast he could run. The boy was estimated at running about 34 miles per hour and had the ability to leap 13 feet through the air. In comparison, most Olympic sprinters can only run about 27 miles per hour. It looks like if you want to win the Olympics, you better go live with the gazelles. In the end, the gazelle boy allegedly escaped captivity and went back into the wild. However, nobody actually knows if this story is true. Some swear it really happened. Others say it was just an elaborate hoax. Number 4. The Wolf Boy. When it comes to children being raised by animals, a story you commonly hear is the boy raised by wolves in the forest. And the wolf boy, Ramu, is undoubtedly the most famous case of this actually happening. He was originally found in 1976, running through the woods on all fours with a group of wolf cubs who, apparently, the child had been growing up alongside of. His hair was matted, he had long nails like claws, and he wasn't in the healthiest of conditions. The local Indian news stations reported he was only about 10 years old at the time he was found. He had been eating raw meat with his wolf family, and even after he was captured and brought back into society, the boy would sometimes sneak outside and gobble up the raw chickens that he found in the neighborhood. Ugh. Luckily for him, he was sent to live with Mother Teresa's Missionaries of Charity, and they patiently taught him how to bathe and wear clothes, and act like a relatively normal human. However, the boy never truly learned how to speak, and he never really integrated into society. Then, in 1985, the United News of India reported that Ramu, the wolf boy, had died in his early 20s while living in a home for the destitute about 250 miles from the capital, New Delhi. It's not super clear why he died, but apparently he had been having cramps in the weeks prior to his death, but had never been given proper medical treatment. Poor kid. Number 3. Wild Peter. In 1725, Wild Peter was found alone and naked in a German forest. He was likely left behind by his parents, who probably didn't have the means to take care of him. But that turned out okay for Peter. He managed to take care of himself pretty well. To this day, Wild Peter is one of the more confusing stories of feral children, and also one of the most inhumane. You see, after Peter was rescued from the forest, he was brought to London, where he became a human pet at the famous Kensington Palace. Everyone assumed the boy had been raised either by wolves or bears, seeing as he hobbled around on all fours and he couldn't talk, and no one seemed to be able to teach him how to talk properly. He wouldn't even sleep in a bed. Instead, he would just curl up on the floor in a corner. But here's where things get really grotesque. The fancy folks at Kensington Palace eventually grew tired of Peter, and so they donated him to a farm. The farm that he went to even had a collar made for him in case he got lost. And according to the BBC, you can still see Peter's headstone in Hertfordshire today. Number 2. Wolf Girls. In the 1920s, 2 girls named Amala and Kamala were found being raised by a she-wolf in the wilderness of India. They were spotted by a local villager who thought it was strange that wolf cubs looked an awful lot like humans. It turns out that's because they were humans. They were quickly seized by the villagers and then taken to an orphanage. Both of them appeared very wolfish, and they were extremely fond of raw meat. They even slurped their liquids with their tongues rather than drinking like ordinary humans. Oh, and their tongues even hung out of their mouths just like wolves. Unfortunately, the youngest girl died shortly after being brought to the orphanage, and her sister Kamala was then left alone. As hard as they tried, it was difficult getting Kamala to act like an actual human. They eventually did make very slow progress, but it was clear that living in the wild as a child had pretty much ruined her. It was never found out who left the 2 girls in the wilds in the first place, and unfortunately, Kamala then passed away in 1929, less than 10 years after she was rescued. Number 1. The Girl Raised by Monkeys. A crew of lumberjacks working in a secluded area of India, again in India, made the discovery of a lifetime when they stumbled upon a young girl walking on all fours and screeching at them like she was a monkey. The men quickly alerted government officials of what they had seen, and 2 months later, she was discovered again. It turned out the young girl had been raised by monkeys. She was found mostly naked and completely unable to talk to humans. She had cuts and bruises all over her legs and elbows. According to the authorities at the time, she had been living quite comfortably with the animals. She was also completely terrified of the humans who found her. She couldn't speak or hear properly. She was being guarded by actual monkeys, and she appeared weakened and very hungry. According to her rescuers, if they hadn't gotten there in time, the young girl could have easily been eaten by other animals. Her rescuers gave her some food to eat and took her out of the jungle. But what was this girl doing out there being raised by monkeys in the first place? Sadly, it turned out that she had been abandoned in the wilderness by her parents who didn't want her. It's not clear at what age she had been abandoned, but it was early enough for her to become more of a monkey than a girl. Even after being brought back to civilization and checked into a hospital, she had trouble adjusting to her new life. She was feral, violent, and preferred to eat her food off the floor. Even the chief medical officer of the hospital said she was behaving just like a monkey. The girl has been making steps towards transitioning back into a human ever since this story was published. Hopefully, she can live a normal life by the time she's an adult. Thanks for watching. Which animal would you prefer to be raised by? Let me know in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. See you next time. Bye!